Welcome to Northern Powerhouses, our business success stories series of interviews where we discuss with local business leaders their backgrounds, their successes and challenges, and what's really driving them forward. And today I'm delighted to have with us Anna Sutton, who's the CEO and co-founder at Datashed. So firstly, Anna, thanks so much for taking the time to speak to us. And if you'd like to introduce yourself and Datashed to the people watching and let us know how you help people.
Hi Chris, thanks for having me. I'm Anna Sutton. I am the co-founder of the Datashed. The other co-founder is my husband, which I'm sure we'll talk about later, because working together and homeschooling through a pandemic was as much fun as you can imagine it was. Yes, we work with lots of different clients, both in the Leeds City region and beyond, to understand what data they have in their businesses, how they can use it to drive better decision making, how to drive out any potential issues from a cleanliness and a trust perspective. So we do all sorts of different things with all sorts of different people, but it's the core of our business is data engineering. So most of our team are real data engineers, write lots of code, really help look at data sources, how we pull them together, how we glue them together and make them work together to drive additional insights for different businesses. So it's a really interesting job, and you come across all sorts of different problems that people have. But most businesses have, and most organisations have, the same thing in common. They have lots of information, they just don't know how to use it to drive better outcomes, either being monetary profit related or whether it's value-based outcomes in public sector. So all sorts of different challenges out there. Every day is a school day and every day is different. So
sounds fascinating. My first business was in software engineering, and we handled quite a lot of data, so a long time ago. But it'd be interesting to know. I know, for me it was that conversion from sort of data to information. It's data, so much of it you can't really you get hold of it, but when you can get the value from the data, it's so valuable.
Yeah, well, data in and of itself isn't valuable unless you're doing something with it.
Yes.
And I think that's a really tricky thing, because data can be quite risky to hold. I was talking earlier about GDPR, but it's not something I want to talk in great detail about because it's not particularly exciting, but it does introduce quite a big risk into different organisations, and you've really got to take care of your data. But unless you're actually using it, it doesn't drive any value for your business. So it's looking at what kind of questions you might want to understand better, what kind of questions you might want to have answers to but you can't get to. What do you have and where are your gaps? What do you have and what is utter rubbish in there? How do you clean it up? And how do you get it into the hands of people who are making decisions? Because just because it's data and just because it's held in tech doesn't mean that it belongs in IT. You need to get the data into the hands of people who are making decisions, and that doesn't mean that they are data literate or that they know particularly how to understand data. So it's actually one of the real challenges once you've got the data in an interesting and clean state is how do you then convert it into insight at the right level for the people who can then consume it and use it, because that's where it's at that point it becomes really valuable.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Absolutely. So could you tell us a little bit more about your background, how you got into business and why this particular one?
Yes. So I am not a data scientist, nor am I a data engineer, nor can I write code, which is, I think a lot of people think that to work in tech that you have to have those qualities. I'm here to prove that you don't. My business partner does, however. So yeah, my background is in marketing. So I went to university in Manchester, did a management science degree with a specialism in marketing. And then I left uni and went into, I worked in lots of different agencies in Leeds. We have loads of marketing agencies in Leeds, really brilliant ones. Worked across all kinds of different clients, worked in account handling. So I was all about the client service and the project management side. At that point, we were looking at return on investment. We did a lot of direct mail back in the days, and I'm now really starting to show my age. We did a lot of direct mail, which obviously is about data and segmentation. We looked at lots of how we measure success. Working agency side, it was quite frustrating because clients would rarely share the real data and insight with you. So then I made the jump over to client side. So I've worked for a couple of big firms in Leeds and Bradford in their marketing teams. One of which was quite forward thinking. So it's about 10, 11, 12, 13 years ago. God, I'm losing track of time. So about 13 years ago, I worked for a financial services business in the region, and they combined data scientists, marketing people, and kind of credit and risk specialists together. And they pulled us together into a team called Value Management, and they tasked us with adding value. So it was adding value for the business and adding value for the customers of that business. So we worked together as a team to really drive insight-led marketing, right. really measure that, those return on investment, really understand which segments were working and how and why. And it was the first time I'd ever really had the opportunity to work with a really excellent data team that were really kind of shaped around driving that value add. And then I was made redundant from there because the business unit I was working for wasn't going to exist anymore. And then I moved to another organisation in the region, which was an FMCG business, working probably for the first time in reality. They worked in e-commerce. It was their first kind of push into e-commerce. And they had no way of tracking what was going on. They had no data specialism or capability. So I went from one end of the spectrum right to the other. And it was incredibly challenging. And it was quite frustrating, as I'm sure you can imagine, being asked to build a data strategy without any insight around segmentation, any insight about purchase patterns and behaviours, and understanding recency, frequency and value is obviously the first step in any kind of marketing journey in terms of what your current customers are doing to be able to inform what else they might want to do and who else you might want to target. Yeah. So at that point, I spent a number of hours on the phone to my now business partner and husband, who I'd met at the previous role, about how frustrating it was, and how irritating it was not being able to do it myself. Yeah. So at that point, a bit of a penny dropped in that we thought, actually, we should build a tool that would allow people like me to integrate data sets to allow them to inform their decision making, be that marketing or product development or just general business KPIs, but basically understanding who their customers are and what they're doing. So basically a self-service single view of a customer in industry terms. I hate industry language. It does put up all sorts of barriers. So yeah, that's what we decided we were going to do. And then I had a baby, which kind of put a bit of a spanner in the works. I went back to work, and then I had another baby. Well, I was pregnant with another baby, and I was made redundant at about 7 months pregnant.
Oh, goodness.
And at that point in time, we thought, you know what, now's the perfect time to set that business up. Let's go. So Ed then handed his notice in. We bought our first house. Ed handed his notice in. I was 8 months pregnant with a 18-month-old baby at home. So we took the leaf and off we went. So we started to look at building out the product. We realised that was going to require money and other engineers, which don't come cheap. So we decided to self-fund that build by building out a consultancy business. So now we have the data shed, which is our consultancy business, and we have the data refinery, which is our self-service single view of a customer product. So that was launched about a year ago. We have a couple of clients on it now, kind of doing the beta testing work with us. We are now looking for other clients to go onto that data platform. And we have a data consultancy business, which turns over roughly 5 million quid a year, with lots of big clients with big data problems. So it's an interesting life.
Sounds amazing, absolutely amazing. So when you were growing up, was this the sort of thing you always thought you would be doing?
So that's a really interesting question. I hadn't really thought about that until about 4 years ago. I mean, I've always wanted. Part of me has always wanted to have my own business, but I had absolutely no idea what. I've always been really interested in being an entrepreneur, having my own business. I did the Young Enterprise at school.
Yep, brilliant.
Absolutely loved it. and then went to uni and did business. My dad was really keen. He's like, you shouldn't do art, you should go and do business, you'll make more money that way. I was like, okay, Dad. But when Ed and I were talking, we both realised, it wasn't unknown to us, but we were both like, oh, yeah, both of our dads had their own businesses too. And we both just grew up thinking that was normal. So my dad set his business up in the 1980s, and it was a fulfillment company and printing business. So they use data a lot.
Yeah. Yes.
And Ed's dad was a printer. So we were just exposed to that life from a really young age. It's just always been dead normal for us to have your own business. So I do think that actually, while it was obviously quite a risky thing to do at 8 months pregnant with an 18-month-old baby, we both knew that we could go out contracting if we needed to, and we definitely had that as a backstop. But yeah, I do think that having two parents that did it made it a lot more normal for us and really kind of reduced those barriers, and because we'd seen it and we understood kind of what it took.
I think it makes a difference, doesn't it? Because it you know, as you say, traditional route is, you know, going to education, into working for other people, and which is fine, and most people stay there. But you know, I mean, it's only a small percentage, but I meet people, they've just got that entrepreneurial bug, and it's just, I've got to do this for myself, whether it's, you know, sooner or later. It's at some point I need to do this for myself. So looking at the business itself, and obviously it's founded at a point when you were you know, 7 months pregnant, and since that point moving forward, what do you say some of the biggest issues you've had to overcome?
So for me, my biggest hurdle is probably my own imposter syndrome. So being and this kind of links back to something I said a couple of minutes ago. I think that jargon and technical jargon and industry jargon is such a barrier to entry, and a real issue, actually, particularly in the tech sector.
Yes.
And you can feel quite excluded because you don't speak the language, and you feel like you don't understand. And one of the upsides of being at home with two children when we started the business was that I could kind of potter around and do things in the background, and I could add value here and there, and I could, you know, pick up the books, and I could set up some teams, and I could do part-time work and be at home with the children. So that was brilliant. Yeah. But when Ben went to school, so my youngest, he went to school in September 2017, and I started work at my own business full-time for the first time, which is a very weird thing. And I walked in, and Ed had been running it up until that point, and after a couple of months, he said, I really need you to take over the day-to-day running so I can focus on the tech side, because we had a really big tech team. And I agreed, and he said, well, I think you should be chief executive. I was like, that's a very big job title. Why do you think I should be chief executive? He said, well, if you're chief executive, it means that I can be CTO, but what job title will I have if you're managing director? It doesn't really make any sense. I was like, okay, I understand kind of the logic, but that's a bit terrifying. And at which point I was like, how can I be chief executive and leader of a tech organization when I can turn my own laptop on? I have proven it. I'm here. Hello. But my technical prowess and my ability to code and do what, you know, the majority of the team who work for us are engineers. I couldn't write a line of code if my life depended on it. And trying to get my head around how somebody without that capability, without that language, and without that kind of understanding about what it takes to do their day-to-day job could lead a team like that was, I mean, honestly, it really struck fear into my heart for a number of months. And I found that very difficult to get my head around. And then in early 2018, I went to a number of events at Leeds Digital Festival. So the Digital Festival now happens every September. It used to be in spring. And I went to a mentoring session, and I met the lady who is now my leadership coach at one of those events. And she has totally turned around my life in terms of my imposter syndrome, how I approach things. And we've now kind of shifted from the fact that me not knowing the language was a problem, me not looking like, you know, the rest of the team, you know, was a problem for me. She's like, your difference is your superpower. And it absolutely is, because one of our core values as a business is know your audience. So obviously a number of our clients are not technical either. So one of my key challenges and back to the team has always been, if you can't get me to understand what you're saying, then how do you expect the clients to understand it? So we've kind of flipped it all. So yes, the biggest challenge was imposter syndrome, but it has been overcome in the main. I've occasionally found myself in very random, unusual situations thinking, my goodness me, how on earth did I get here and what am I doing in this room? And you just have to give yourself a bit of a kick.
Brilliant. And you're in very good company with a number of people I speak to that have imposter syndrome. So it's perfectly cool. Interestingly enough, a couple of things that come to mind. One is our founder, Brad Sugars, is a very successful guy, started and built and bought and built lots of businesses. And I remember at one point he told me that he got to a phase where he would only buy businesses where he couldn't possibly do the work, because then he was never tempted to. It was like, our job is growing it, it's not doing the work. So it's absolutely important that we're seen as the people steering the ship, because the guys that are, you know, putting the sails up and hauling the anchor, they don't want us next to them doing that, because if we're doing that, we're not steering the ship. And it's sort of understanding. And I think the other thing came to mind, I think it was Einstein said that if you can't explain to a 6-year-old, then you don't understand it yourself. So
well, quite. I completely agree with him. Yeah, it is interesting. It has been an interesting challenge to kind of get my head around that. I mean, obviously, with my background, I could come in and I could set up the project management teams and look after the client service side, and that was all fine, operational stuff, no problem. But it did take me a while to think, oh yeah, I do have something to add here. So yeah, it's just about unearthing your own skill set and finding your own voice. But it is very difficult to be strategic and tactical at the same time. So if I'm in the weeds, then it means you stop looking forward and where you're going, and you start looking at where you are now, and you do run into a few walls that way if you're not careful.
Yeah. And funny enough, I remember in my first business, there was a situation where the MD, who was very technical in this particular, was literally calling the client an idiot because they didn't understand, but was literally sort of saying, well, that could never work, that's all we could do. And you know, didn't really get the fact that it's not about whether technical situation, it's what the client needs, we could deliver. So no, absolutely brilliant. So what will you say some of the biggest learnings you've had over that period in business or even in life?
So I think overcoming imposter syndrome has been really interesting, because if you feel like you've got to prove yourself all the time, it can be very difficult to hire people who are better than you.
Yep.
And if you're going to run a successful business, then that is exactly what you have to do. I think a lot of people think entrepreneurs have got big egos, and to be fair, quite a lot of them do. And most of us have ego. I mean, everyone's got ego. Everybody in the world has ego. It's just how you manage it, really. And it can be quite, well, there's nothing that quite squashes your ego like hiring somebody on more money than you, who's better at it than you, and trying to tell them what to do. I mean, it's quite an interesting experience. So yeah, I think learning to swallow your ego and looking for the best person you can afford, who is better at that thing than you are, is a huge learning. And well, it's one that I learned quite early, because I had to hire an FD, because the idea of me doing cash flow is an absolute disaster. And nobody like me should be allowed to do cash flow or accounts. I mean, I can do basic stuff, that's fine, but when it comes to the real complex stuff, no. Best person you can afford, and the best accountancy firm you can afford as well, and the best lawyers you can afford from a contractual perspective. Certainly in our world, handling data, the contracts need to be watertight. You need to understand warranties, you need to understand IP. So yes, a lot of stuff we learned quite early on. But yeah, hiring the best people, way better than you are, is the best lesson I think I've learned from being in this job.
But very, very wise. And you mentioned coaches before. Obviously, we're a business coaching organisation. So keen to know who's the best coach you've ever had and what made them so.
So I've worked with different leadership coaches, but Claire, who I work with now, I've been working with for nearly 4 years. And Claire is she's basically an authenticity and values-led coach. So it's about finding your true voice, understanding what makes you tick, understanding what makes your organisation tick. and making sure that you stay true to that, and doing all sorts of different exercises to kind of keep you on track. And I think what she's helped shine a light on for me is why certain things feel difficult and why certain things feel right, and how to link that back to my personal values and my core values as an individual, and then looking at why I might be clashing with another person because of potentially a clash in our own personal values, or a different, how those values impact us when we come at a situation from completely different angles. And actually, if you can understand where someone else is coming from that perspective, it takes the heat out of the situation completely, and how you can actually then tackle the issue at hand by leveraging their abilities and their opinion as something that you can respect as different to yours, and bring that voice to the table in a way that is really meaningful and useful. And I think particularly for me, when I see other members of my team potentially struggling, or we do values, core values with everybody. So we run a core value session with work with people probably about twice a year, to kind of scoop everybody up who's new, to help them understand that, and then also run feedback training sessions so that people can all kind of figure out who they are and how they work together and stuff.
Brilliant.
And I think it's just she's really kind of shone a light on the power of that work, really, and how it can really change people's lives. I've seen it change some of the team's lives in terms of understanding who they are and why they are the way they are, and it helps them accept those things that they may not necessarily find that attractive about themselves. Yeah,
and it's bang on. I mean, one thing I led myself to believe quite a long time ago was that good relationships come with a match of goals. We won't both want to achieve the same thing. That's a good basis. But great relationships come with a match of values. We both believe the same things are important, and it's okay to have different values, but it's trying to find that common ground that's so key. But for me, and I know you're a marketeer, so but for me, marketing should be values based. It's like it's this is who we are. This is what we believe is important. And if you believe the same thing, we will work well with you, whether you're a client, whether you're a team member or a supplier. And it's that match of values that's so important.
It is, and also people can sniff out inauthenticity.
Yes.
With uncanny precision. And I think, let's not stray into current events, but I think that's where kind of value-led and authenticity has really shone a light on, how not to do things. And, if you are inauthentic with your message, or your message doesn't match your values, it is obvious to the people around you. And I think that's really important in marketing, and in terms of, things you show with your team, internal comms, making sure that you maintain authenticity throughout is key to kind of developing that loyalty and that relationship with both your team and your customers.
100%. I can't think who you might be related to, we referred to, but we'll pass through. Absolutely. I was going to offer one of them, but I won't. So over your time, have you? I'd love to collect favourite quotes or sayings. Is there any favourite quotes or sayings that you fall back on at any point in time, or you like to use?
I always fall back on the wonderful Dr. Seuss for any sayings and meaningful sayings. So I do a lot of speaking with schoolgirls in STEM, trying to encourage girls to think about taking paths into tech, trying to, again, knock down those barriers in terms and those preconceptions that you have to be technical, you have to be a maths genius, you have to be a coder to work in tech. You do not. And often when I'm talking to them, I appreciate, when I'm a 43-year-old woman talking to a room full of 16-year-olds, coming back to that world of authenticity, where I can authentically speak about being a businesswoman, I can't authentically speak about what it is to be a 16-year-old girl today with all the challenges that face. And so I always fall back on this one, which is, you have brains in your head, you have feet in your shoes, you can steer yourself in any direction you choose. And I think it's just about, relying on yourself and your own capability to drive yourself forward, and you have everything you need. You just need to get out there and get on with it. So that's it's not really for me, it's more for other people. I kind of come back to it, but if I'm having a bad day, get on with it, Anna. Off you go, you'll be fine.
we talk about something called we call about operating above the point of power, and below the point of power, we do blame or excuses or denial. We're blaming other people or other things or situations, or denying we've got a problem. And above it, we talk about ownership, accountability, and responsibility. And what that means for me, and it was one of the most powerful things I learned when I joined Action Coach, was we're all where we are right now, both physically, mentally, financially, whatever, because of all the decisions we've made and actions we've taken over time. And that means for me then, wherever I want to get to in the future, it's not about what anybody else does, it's my actions, my decisions. And it's, you know, for me, taking that ownership and just saying, like, yeah, wherever I am, it's I've chosen to be here, so I can choose to be somewhere else. And I think that, you know, your quote is bang on in that respect. It's just let's crack on and let's just make our own future.
I think when you're younger, you're so frightened of making mistakes, and you're so frightened of taking the wrong decision or doing the wrong thing or being judged by other people, that it can almost it has such a detrimental effect on the choices that you make, because you're making choices for other people and for fear of what they'll think about you, rather than making them really understanding who you are and what's going to make you happy. And I think, you know, the more we can shift the next generations from that point of view to a world where they actually understand themselves and they can make their own choices, and they don't have to follow the traditional path, and they don't have to do something because it looks like what's the post popular girl or popular boy at school is doing. Actually doing something that is fulfilling for you, and what does that look like, and how do we, and this is where my problem with careers advice really comes in, you know, how do we kind of bust down these old-fashioned thought processes about, you know, going to be a doctor or going to be a lawyer, nothing wrong with those professions, but, you know, I saw these women speaking a few weeks ago, and I can't remember what it was that they called it, but the career ladder is broken, long live the career squiggle, or something along those lines. And I mean, my career path very much of a squiggle, and I think we have to normalize that for people and get people to understand that, you know, just because you've chosen a job in your early 20s doesn't mean that that's the way you have to stay. Yep,
bang on. It's amazing how, I mean, when I think about how many people I've interviewed, and you know, where they are now is very unrelated to where they started. You know, I've got people that you know started as lawyers and now run very, very large businesses. I mean, which isn't necessarily an uncommon thing. People have gone into, you know, they started marketing and ended up in technical, or technical and ended up in marketing. It's very difficult. Let's be perfect. You know, for me, it's, you know, 16 to 18 or even 19, 20. How can we possibly really know what we want to be? It's almost an impossible task, isn't it?
It is. I mean, our engagement manager used to run a coffee shop.
Brilliant.
And then she came to be our PA, and she was absolutely brilliant at learning and development and understanding what made our team tick. Well, like, no, you're wasted here. You go over there and go do that. Brilliant. And I do think that, you know, there are so many options in today's career market that, you know, careers advice is a really difficult thing to offer. It's impossible, because the world is changing so fast. But yeah, I think you're bringing it back to the quote, you know, if you can understand yourself and you can understand what makes you happy and what kind of, you listen to yourself, then you can pick things that are going to at least make you feel fulfilled and help you find out what's next on your journey.
And the number of you know, cases of 6 people that have created a great success around just doing what they love, you know, and I know, you know, quite a few people have just said, look, this is what I always wanted to do. I've done it. I've been so passionate about it. In some cases, they've just kept doing it, and that's, but in other cases, they've also created a business around it. It's like, you know, it's that passion to do what we love to do, but also maybe introduce other people to it.
Yeah.
What would you say you've learned about yourself throughout your journey?
I'm a lot more resilient than I thought I was. I'm also, what have I thought about? Oh God, I've learned all sorts about myself. I've almost forgotten who my old person was. I think, God, I used to be terrified of conflict. I'm a lot more resilient than I ever gave myself credit for. And with enough practice, you can deal with anything. So I used to be terrified of public speaking. I used to be terrified of any kind of conflict. I used to be quite a bit of a mouse, to be honest. I wouldn't say boo to a goose. And the more you chuck yourself into situations, I mean, I don't mean putting yourself into a situation you're really afraid, that's a bit daft, but pushing yourself out of your comfort zone can achieve miraculous amount of growth and change. And you can look back, just 6 months later and go, golly, look at how far I've come, and look at how I'm doing something that I never thought I would ever be able to do. I mean, public speaking is one of those things, isn't it, that everyone's frightened of to start with, or certainly most people are. I mean, I still would probably have a bit of a knocky knees if I went out in front of more than 50 people, but I can stand up in a room full of 50 people quite happily and chat about things that I'm comfortable about now, no problem. And a room full of 10 would have killed me 4 years ago. So yeah, if you keep pushing yourself out there, it's amazing what change and differences will come along, what you can get used to.
Absolutely. And I like this phrase, I don't know if it's the same, but the idea that growth happens outside our comfort zone. Inside our comfort zone, there's no change, there's no growth. And what I also find actually is, when I talk to people about comfort zones, is for many people, the comfort zone is actually a discomfort zone. They actually don't like being where they are. And it's sort of say, well, why would you stay there if but it is difficult to move out. If there can be a lot of fear involved. But change only happens when we get outside our comfort zone. So it's wonderful to hear what you've achieved. What would you say, just looking forwards now, what would you say the future looks like for you guys, and what might be the main challenges you face moving forward, if any?
So I think the next real challenge for me is to get the data refinery, so our products are completely different business model. It's a SaaS, so oh god, there we go again, software as a service. So people buy a license to it, and you pay monthly or yearly to use the service to integrate with your cloud data solutions, so your ERP system, your CRM system, your email platform, your Google platforms, advertising, whatever. You glue it all together, it pushes it through a matching algorithm, and it publishes it all out into analytical models and into dashboards and KPI dashboards, and helps reporting, helps with understanding, helps with segmentation, helps with understanding what your customers want, what they're doing, what else they might want, all that kind of stuff. So that's now there. We've already built one business, and now I've got to go away and build another one, whilst making sure the other one doesn't fall apart. So I've got a big team around me now on the other one. And the idea of doing it again makes me a bit tired, but that's fine. I can sleep. I think I'm quite intimidated by, so the consultancy was almost an accident. It was a very happy accident, but we built it as the funding vehicle for the product business. It's now super well structured. I've learned so many lessons about operationalizing and scaling a business, and hiring and firing, and what it takes to actually put the right structures in place to grow out a team, because you end up with all sorts of problems if you don't get the right people in the right spots, and how your organizational model is a never revolving thing that stays the same for approximately 20 minutes until it needs to change again. So that's all done on that side once, never done. It's still growing. So that's the next phase of growth. So that's we need to get from 60 to 100 people by the end of 2022, the end of 22-23, so our year end is in March 23. So we've got really significant growth plans this year, which is great, and we're completely on track from a new business perspective. But hiring in the tech market right now is an absolute nightmare. I mean, I think hiring in any market is difficult, but tech in particular is very troublesome. So that'll be interesting to see how we actually deliver 100 people's worth of work with 60 people, because it's coming and we need to find people to support it. So that's the challenge on that side. But meanwhile, we need to get this SaaS business, which is a completely different business model with completely different challenges, like understanding pricing, understanding recurring revenue, which is the model by which you measure success in that kind of business, as opposed to EBITDA profit margins on the other side. And it's a bit of a head bender, flipping between business models from one week to the next. So that's probably the next challenge, really. We've done all the build phase now, and now moving into marketing and sales phase on that business, which means I need to spend more time in it, which is great, because they've got a senior management team now in the data shed consultancy. But a little bit me really scared, because it means I've got to go and prove that it's worth something. And I've been able to go, they're just doing a good job building it. We've got a couple of clients, and that's lovely. And now I've got to really go and put my money where my mouth is, and actually go away and make it work. and drive the growth on that side, which is really exciting. But I'm not going to lie, the imposter syndrome is definitely starting to creep back in, because it's like, who do you think you are thinking you can do this? I'm like, I can do it, and shut that voice up, and I'm going to get away with it. I'm going to get on with it. But it's very much outside my comfort zone. I've worked in the consultancy business model pretty much my entire career. I've worked in marketing agencies and what have you. So I really, really understand that side inside and out. But this one is completely new. So it isn't something that comes as naturally to me. So that's going to be a huge challenge over the next 12 months, I would say.
Well, I have to say, if you look back on what you've achieved so far, I think you can ramp down on the imposter syndrome a little bit. It is interesting, actually, because we grew to over 100 people and sort of 12 million turnover, and there are those stages also of going through. I know you're looking at two different businesses, but even just that difference between, you probably found already that sort of 0 to 20, 30 people, everybody, the families, the dog, you know everything. And then you get to a stage where you know the people, but you don't necessarily know the families. And then ultimately you get to that point where, who's that new person? I don't even know. I've been here 2 years. And it's those sorts of things.
In lockdown. Turn up to the office now, I'm like, who was that?
Absolutely. And it's absolutely. It's like, because then, we're about, and it's those sorts of slightly subtle challenges that are there too, I think. It's just the function of growth and size that does come on its own. Absolutely fascinating. It would be good to pop by in a year, maybe 2023. I think you said to April, just to see where we're at that point.
Maybe give me a little bit, but so April 2023 is we should hopefully have achieved all of our goals from a consultancy business perspective. We're working towards break even on the product side, so that's the biggest challenge that we have on that side of the business, and then it's self-sustaining from that point forward. So that's our real focus on that side. So fingers crossed, we shall get there.
Okay, I really wish you best luck. I'm sure you'll achieve what you choose to. Just a couple of sort of quick questions as we close. If you were to start your business again, what might you do differently?
Well, I might not have done it while I was pregnant next time. What would I have done differently? I would. It's really difficult to do that. To go back to the beginning and to not know what I know now. What would I do differently? I would have got a decent accountant to start off with rather than a bookkeeper, because our first year's books were a mess and I had to sort that out. And I would have integrated with the ecosystem a lot faster. So to be fair, that was really hard back then. Now the signposting for support and for different networking groups is so much better. I mean, there is so much help out there if you go and look for it. So part of the Lean-In Circle in Leeds, which is a female network, well, it's the Lean-In Circle is based on the book by Sheryl Sandberg. It is mainly women, but men are welcome. So it's about getting together and learning lots of different things. So that's great. There's the Digital Festival, which has loads of events on twice a year. There's the Leopard Adventure, which has all sorts of different support. So just hooking into different events. There are events in our ecosystem weekly. You just got to go and look for them. And I mean, Twitter's great for sourcing things like that. And the thing about that I love so much about Leeds is once you ask one person, if they can't help you, they'll know somebody who does, and they're always happy to pass you along. And if someone can help you, they will sit and they will help you. And I have made so many connections for other people in that vein that have come up with the most surprising results. So I think that would be the advice I'd give back to myself, is to hook into the ecosystem a lot faster and get to know other local founders faster. Because then you can get that support network, which is really important. Running a business can be a lonely affair. Finding other founders is a really good thing to have in your network.
Definitely, it can be very lonely. And finally, slightly different question, but I would appreciate it might be a similar answer. But what would be the best advice you'd give to an 18-year-old you if you could?
Stop listening to other people and start listening to yourself.
Brilliant.
I think that's, I mean, going back to the conversation we were having earlier about understanding who you are and what you want, rather than doing what you think. It's how I got married and divorced because everyone else was getting married. I thought it was a great idea. Turns out no. You've got to follow your own path. You've got to listen to your gut. No one understands what is better for you than you do, and that is what you need to hook into as early as you can, and then trust it.
I love that. Sorry, that's a lovely quote. No one will understand what's best for you than you do. Thank you. I think that's bang on. It's that going back to your whole, the whole authenticity thing, isn't it? We've got to be ourselves, because it's like, why would you want to live a life where we've been trying to be somebody else?
Exactly.
It's pretty crap. Well, Anna, that's been really, really fascinating and very, very enjoyable as well. So I really thank you very much, and I wish you really best of luck with this newish venture, and I'm sure it'll be as successful as the Data Shed itself.
I hope so. Thanks, Chris, and thank you for having me.
You're welcome.